Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM and 790 AM KFYO. Texas Independence Day. Thank you for tuning in. Joining me right now on the phones, the senior senator from the great state of Texas, U.S. Senator John Cornyn. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Chad. Happy Texas Independence Day.
To you as well. Appreciate you taking some time today to visit with us. Obviously, the big news that everybody has been talking about is the Second Amendment, school safety, and the issue of guns. I watched the roundtable the other day, and it seemed to me you were uncomfortable at times with what was being said in the room, and you were just waiting for someone to maybe say, "Hey, Senator, we have an important phone call. We need you to step out of here." What did you take away, one, from that meeting, and what have you heard since then? In other words, what is the president's plan as far as guns?
Well, we saw a catastrophic failure in Florida, which of course led to this shooting. And it's not just about guns. I know some people want to make it about guns, but it's about our schools. It's about mental health services. It's about families. It's about the law enforcement, and it's also about the responsibility of social media platforms that publish threats of school violence, but don't seem to follow up on it. So, but to talk specifically about the meeting the president had at the White House, I think that format serves the president's purposes very well, because what it does is it demonstrates his concern, and we're all concerned, but he also is listening to different points of view, some of which I agreed with, some of which I didn't agree with, but I thought it was a useful exercise. Well, I would characterize that as a brainstorming session. It's not a legislative strategy session. It's not necessarily how do we get this across the finish line into the president's desk. That was really a conversation we've had to continue after we left there. But last night, the president reached out to me. I was flying to Houston, where now I'm heading back to Austin. But the president reiterated his support for improving our broken background check system. This is the failure of which led to the death of 26 people at Sutherland Springs and the injuries to 20 more. And to me, that's the most common sense consensus position where we can build from. If there are other things people want to talk about and perhaps vote on, I'm fine with that, but I think we ought to fix our broken background check system, which changes none of our current law. It just is a way of holding people responsible who, under current law, can't legally possess or purchase a firearm.
Talk a little bit more about the Fix NICS. I know that's what it's been called, the Fix NICS piece of legislation. The House, I believe, has passed a version of this, but it hasn't passed in the Senate yet. What all would this do?
Well, what it would do is, for example, in Sutherland Springs, the shooter there bought guns even though he was a convicted felon. He'd been convicted of domestic violence against his ex-wife and also his stepchild, and he was less than honorably discharged from the military. He also served time in a mental institution because he had been sending all the signals that he was a danger not only to himself but potentially to others as well. What this would do would be to make sure that the federal government, in this case the Air Force and the Department of Defense, uploaded all this information into the FBI's background check system so that if you go into a gun store and purchase a firearm, you can't lie and get away with it and purchase a firearm even though under current law you're illegally disqualified. This is something that, as I said, Chad, is in an admittedly contentious and polarizing time. This is something now that has 50 co-sponsors in the United States Senate. As you pointed out, a version of it's passed the House. And I think it's the best place to start as we look for other items of consensus. We have one here. We can build on it.
Visiting with U.S. Senator John Cornyn, in your subsequent phone call talks with the president, I know the president has raised in the past the idea of raising the age to purchase a semi-automatic rifle to 21 years old. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that Congress has an appetite for? Personally, I don't see how it would save anyone's life.
Well, you just answered way I would have by your last statement. You know, there's a lot of things that pass for action in Congress which are pure symbolism, and I honestly believe that would be just one of them. If it were necessary to get other things that actually would save lives passed, you know, that's a conversation we ought to have. But by itself, I don't think it's going to make any difference. What we need to do is focus on criminals, on people who are already been determined by a court to be mentally ill, and people who cannot legally purchase firearms. I think putting that additional age requirement on it, I think about, for example, a 19-year-old Marine. Are we going to tell him he can't go in and buy a semi-automatic weapon for sports or hunting or the like? It just doesn't make much sense to me.
What about the president? I know you pushed back against this idea of taking guns first and then due process second. Was that the president just being Trump-like and saying something without really meaning it? What did you take away from that? Because that has obviously caused a lot of people to worry exactly where we're going on this issue.
As it should cause concern, because of course we're talking about a constitutional right here, and we don't deny people their constitutional rights, any of them, without due process of law, a notice and an opportunity to be heard in a court. And so I think perhaps the president was, as I said earlier, just sort of brainstorming. You'd have to ask him whether he was serious about that particular item, but I don't see us going there. I don't think we should go there. But there are things we could do to make sure that people who do suffer from serious mental illness don't get their hands on firearms. We know that there are cases like at the Virginia Tech where the state of Virginia didn't upload the information about an adjudicated mental illness case on the background check system, so the shooter was able to buy the gun anyway. We know a lot of these shootings. Adam Lanza at Sandy Hook, his mother knew he was mentally ill, and of course he took her guns and killed her, and then these poor children at the school. There ought to be ways, and we've already acted to some extent, to provide warning signs and notice and an opportunity to intervene before people hurt themselves or others with firearms or any other weapon.
It sounds like, from what you're saying, you would on tackling this issue, you want to see an improvement in school safety, on the issue of mental health, and obviously fixing the background check system, but not necessarily any action on guns themselves, correct?
I think you summarized it well. I think those are the three areas where, to your point earlier on the gun, on the age limit, we would have the greatest potential for actually saving lives. That ought to be our focus. How do we save lives, not how do we engage in useless symbolism that doesn't actually have any positive impact.
What do you think about the idea? One more question on this, and then I have one other question off of guns. But what do you think about the idea of the temporary restraining order? I know that Senator Rubio has talked about that quite a bit lately.
Well, I do know that this came up during the meeting at the White House, and apparently some of the states do have a process where if somebody is exhibiting signs of mental illness, potentially danger not only to themselves but to others, that they can be brought into court, and then based on evidence, a judge can issue a restraining order that will limit their access to firearms for at least a temporary period, after which their mental health crisis would hopefully be addressed and they would be restored once again. I think that's something I'd be interested in talking more about. I don't really understand exactly how it works. I wouldn't want it to be a pretext or just some sort of opportunity to deny somebody their rights without due process of law. But if the states are trying it and it seems to be working and it is legal and constitutional, then I'd be happy to discuss it further.
Senator, yesterday, as you know, the president announced a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports. We heard from a lot of businesses that did not like this, a lot of our allies who did not like this. The stock market yesterday did not like this. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is a complex topic. I think clearly the president's comments about us being treated unfairly by our trading partners has resonated with a lot of people who feel like their jobs and their livelihood has been threatened by that. But I think what this demonstrates is there's a lot of connected parts that if we impose tariffs on imports, then our trading partners can likewise impose tariffs on not necessarily our steel and aluminum, but on things like agriculture, for example, which would devastate our agricultural communities. And the trading wars, retaliatory actions by trading partners can escalate, and in a way that damages both and really doesn't surgically address the problem. So this is it's a complex topic. The president, as you point out, that was not particularly well received by the markets. I hope we can do some hearings and we can drill down further in this and come up with the right formulation to protect American workers and the ag community, but also at the same time make sure that our rivals around the world, our trading partners, don't exploit our weakness or our unwillingness to stand up for ourselves.
Would you agree that trade wars are a good thing and easy to win?
I do not agree with that. I saw the president made that comment.
Right.
I think he's not communicating the complexity of this and how there can be an action and a reaction that is in some totally unconnected field, because that's where our trading partners feel like they can retaliate.
Yeah. Senator Cornyn, as always, I appreciate your time today. Happy Texas Independence Day to you, and we will visit again soon.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you. That's Senator John Cornyn here on the Chad Hasty Show.